Do you ever get the feeling that maybe, just maybe, anti-LGBTQ Christians are right? That maybe it's really not okay to be queer? That even though you're out and proud and maybe started dating or maybe you have transitioned, you still have that lingering thought in your head that says, what if this is not okay? I know that for many years I had that. I had been out, I had been dating, I had found an affirming church, I was living my life, but every now and then, usually when I was up too late, unable to fall asleep, I would just start to question, what if, what if, what if? And I think that makes sense that for years and years and years I had it beat into my head that LGBTQ people were less than, that we were sick or that we were sinful, or in the nicest of terms, it was not God's best for us. But you know, I am positive beyond a shadow of a doubt that that's not true, that that's not from God, that that's not real. And I'm never more convinced of that than when I'm standing face to face having a conversation with an anti-LGBTQ Christian. Yes, really. When I'm standing face to face and having a conversation about what it actually means to be queer and what it actually means to be Christian, what their arguments actually are, I'm like, oh yeah, this is not at all about God or the Bible or righteousness or faithfulness. This is about fear-mongering and paranoia and power. If you're feeling brave enough, take 1 minute, take just 30 seconds to look at what they're saying about us. That we're in danger in the bathroom, that our relationships are perverted and that damaging, that we're unable to find love, that we're sick and twisted. And then look at the actual LGBTQ people in your own life. Heck, look at yourself or your friend or your neighbor or your pastor. Is that what you see? Because when I look at LGBTQ people, I see brilliant thinkers and compassionate friends and amazing parents and prophetic leaders. This right here is the Bible that I had for much of my growing up. And though the message inside had been twisted to tell me that I was not okay, I keep it around to remember that there is a whole lot of goodness in here. Matthew 7, starting at verse 15 says, "Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruits you will recognize them." And Jesus here isn't talking about fruit and figs. He's talking about theology. He's talking about people who will come proclaiming a gospel that isn't from God. And how will you be able to recognize whether it is or is not from God? Well, Jesus says to judge a tree by its fruit. And no matter how nice you dress it up or how big of a smile you say it with, or whether you're wearing skinny jeans or whether there's fancy lights behind you and a amazing praise band, when there's anti-LGBTQ theology, it leads to depression, it leads to loss of faith, it leads to fracturing of families. Sometimes it even leads to suicide. But when you look at affirming theology, its fruits are clear. It leads to reconciliation, it leads to a return to faith, it leads to healing, it leads to wholeness, it leads to the flowering and flourishing of families and faith communities. And so when I look at the fruits of anti-gay theology, anti-trans theology, anti-queer theology, and I look at the fruits of affirming theology, it's just clear to me one of those brings life and one of those brings death. And like Jesus said, you have to cast out that bad theology and throw it into the fire. And so that's what I have done whenever those lingering doubts come back. I remember those conversations with anti-LGBT Christians, and I look at their fruits, and I am convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that it is absolutely a good and righteous thing to be LGBTQ. And I hope that you, in your soul and your spirit, know that too.